All right, a little more division before we go on to addition and subtraction and solving equations. So lots of factoring to do on this problem. I'm going to go ahead and get everything in the right spot first. So again, we don't need a common denominator, but we do need everything in the right spot. So we need to flip and multiply. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite these. First fraction stays the same. Second fraction is going to flip, so 2x squared minus 3x minus 2 goes up top. Squared minus 4 goes to the top. And now I need to factor. So I think sometimes it's a little bit easier to take these trinomials kind of out of the problem, factor them, and put them back in. So I'm going to take this guy, 2x squared minus x minus 1. That's going to be a complicated one to factor. I'm going to take it off to the side to factor it. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and get that the squares up top dealt with. X squared minus 1 is x minus 1. You might think like, holy cow, there are different squares everywhere. But that's something that you'll keep seeing all year. The quicker that you can identify different squares and use that to your benefit, the better off you will be. You'll see those in trig proofs and limits when we get to the end of the year and all over the place. Alright, so I'm going to factor 2x squared minus x minus 1. 2 times 1 is negative 1 is negative 2. Two numbers that multiply to negative 2 and add to negative 1, and I'm getting that negative 1 from there, are negative 2 and positive 1. So that's what I'm going to change this middle term to. Gotta have x's with it. So the reason that we factor like this is because every step is equal to the step before. We're just rewriting. All right, so I'm going to bring down my 2x squared, bring down my negative 1, cut it in half, and DCF. So 2x squared minus 2x have 2x in common. And when I factor out that 2x, I'm left with x minus 1. My second two terms here just have 1 in common. My parentheses match, so I'm happy. Stuff on the outside. One of my steps to run. Totally factored and beautiful. 2x plus 1, x minus 1. All right. All right, let's deal with the rest, the second part of this fraction. So the second half here, our numerator, 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. I'm going to cut this off. So I'm going to do 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Two numbers that multiply to negative 4 and add to our middle term there, negative 3, are negative 4 and positive 1. Split the middle term. I'm going to bring down my 2x squared, bring down my negative 2. Cut my problem in half. My first two terms have 2x in common. Left with x minus 2. My next two terms just have 1 in common, but my parentheses match, so it's feeling good. 2x plus 1 times x minus 2. So that's going to go in my numerator since I flipped that fraction. 2x plus 1, x minus 2. And then the last piece of factoring I have to do is this difference of squares in the denominator, x squared minus 4, x plus 2, x minus 2, that's what we're done. And now, this is all one fraction. Again, no common denominator needed when we're multiplying. We can cancel. So I'm going to look for things to cancel. X minus 1, x minus 1. 2x plus 1 and a 2x plus 1. And an x minus 2 and an x minus 2. So I'm left with x plus 1 over x plus 2. done and done. Lovely little simplification. All right, the next problem is subtraction. For subtraction and addition, we do need a common denominator. So the most common mistakes made on this test, there are a couple. One is trying to find a common denominator when you don't need one. Here we do need one. So we're going to factor and see what our denominators have in common and what we need. The other thing that we need to make sure is that what we do to the top of a fraction, we do to the bottom with these problems. These are simplifications. There's no equal sign. We're not solving. So when you're just simplifying a fraction, you can multiply by 1, and you can make that 1 look as fancy as you want, or as fancy as you need, but you can only multiply by 1, so you have to be very careful. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is factor my denominators. Again, another difference of squares. X squared minus 36 is x plus 6, x minus 6. My second fraction here, I have x plus 1 over x squared plus 6x. So there I have an x6 common, and x plus 6 is left when I factor that out. So these two fractions have x plus 6 in common. What I need to do is make a common denominator, and my common denominator has to have everything that both these denominators have. So my common denominator needs x plus 6, x minus 6, and this singlet x. And if you don't like that order, you can write it in front. So I like to have that plan and then look at my fractions and see what each fraction needs. My first fraction just doesn't have that singlet x. So in order to make this common denominator happen, I have to multiply this first fraction by x over x. My second fraction doesn't have the x minus 6. So I need to multiply my second fraction by x minus 6 over itself. We have done legal algebra here because the only thing we've multiplied by is 1. X over x is 1. X minus 6 over x minus 6 is also 1. So we're not solving equations. We can't just do one thing to each side. What we're doing is multiplying each fraction by 1. Okay, so my first term here is 2x times x is 2x. I have this minus in the middle, and that minus has to apply to everything over there. So minus, and then I'm going to FOIL this out. X times x is x squared. X times negative 6 is negative 6. 1 times x is 1x. 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. And that, of course, there, negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5x. I'm going to go ahead and kind of, it looks a little messy, but we're almost there. I'm going to keep going here. In my numerator, I have 2x, and then I need to distribute this negative. So negative x squared, positive 5x, positive 6. And my denominator is x times x plus 6 times x minus 6. Turns out I didn't really like that order with the x in the back of the note. All right, let's combine our like terms. I'm going to write my numerator in standard form, so I'm going to write the negative x squared out front. 2x plus 5x is 7x. And my constant is 6. And then you always want to see if you can factor at the end. So in my numerator, I have this negative 1. Negative 1 times 6 is negative 6. Two numbers, what I'm looking for is two numbers that multiply to negative 6 and add to 7. So to multiply to negative 6, I would need negative 6 of positive 1, and those would add to negative 5. Or positive 6 and negative 1 would also multiply to negative 6. And those would add to positive 5. This is not looking helpful. The only other multiples of negative 6 are negative 3 and positive 2. That would add to negative 1. Or positive 3 and negative 2, and that would add to 1. So my numerator there is prime. So that is my final answer of that subtraction. You do always want to look for that last factoring situation. Can I factor and cancel? And if you can't, leave it. All right, beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and end this video, and you can check out the next video for the next set of problems.